Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we'll need the same materials as last week, so make sure you have your book that you started. You have your front and back cover and your signatures. You need your ruler, your sketchbook just in case, your muslin fabric, your seam rimper if you didn't finish putting holes in the cover, and your sewing kit, and then pencils and scissors, and the white glue. Okay, so the type of book we're gonna make, we're not gonna put a piece of cardboard covering the spine because we're gonna work so hard on stitching our pages and covers together that I want to highlight that in our books. So we're gonna leave it with the raw signatures showing in the back. What we're gonna work on today is coating the covers in our fabric, and if we have time, starting the sewing and binding process for the signatures and cover. So make sure that you label the front side of both your back or your front and your back. So I just used A and B. You can write whatever you want to mark it, but make sure you mark the front. Remember that if there's any misalignment in the holes you made, that you want to keep it all the same. So like I told you guys, my holes on the bottom of my signatures are a little closer to the edge than the ones at the top, so I just make sure it's the same direction on every one, and that way I can stay organized. I'm gonna set aside my page signatures for now, just so that they don't get messy, and I'm gonna leave out both covers to work on. So grab your piece of cloth. I unfolded mine. There should be these fold lines going this direction, and try to make sure if there is a wrinkle that it's not a really big one on the piece you use, just so that it's easier on you. And both your covers should fit on here. Let's double check. Yep. Okay, so we're going to cut this piece of fabric along that folded line. I'm going to mark it just for the sake of being as accurate as I can. So 8.5. Just so I try and use as straight of a piece as possible. Make it easy on myself. Okay. So there's my cut line. It's right along the fold. Get your scissors. So we have our piece of cloth. I'm gonna measure it this direction. It's a little bit more than a foot. Looks like almost 1.25 feet. So try center the ruler as much as possible. This isn't as important. This is just for me to help eyeball the placement of my back and front piece. So I just made a really light little guide line. So I'm taking my front and back cover. Remember which is which if you didn't put front or back for the sake of ease. I'm gonna do this. Okay, so you want it front side down, so you're not actually gonna see that writing. I'll write it again, but I just want to keep the right direction. So this is the back. Okay, so on these sides I put a little X, so I know those are the sides that I want to see facing me. That front and back that would face out on your book, so mine would look like this. Back, front are actually gonna go face down on your piece of fabric. And I'm trying to center these as much as I can, just in between where I put that central line. That looks like it should fit pretty well. All right. I wanted to make sure I have enough fabric. I'm gonna cut down the line. It's okay if this part isn't perfect. These edges will end up being hidden in your book cover. Okay, so I have my front book cover with the side I want facing me up. And what we're gonna end up doing is wrapping this fabric around the cover and trying to make it as tight as possible so that we have a nice coating on our book cover. You're probably thinking about the holes and how you won't be able to see them to sew. We're going to make a template to help us with that. So this is just a sheet of paper that I took out of the sketchbook provided for you guys, and I just used my fingernail. You can use your ruler, your pencil, whatever you want to kind of burnish the edge against your cardboard so that you have the corner of the paper aligned with the corner of your cardboard cover, and then it kind of fits into this little pocket you've made in the paper. If you want to cut it to size, you can. I just think this is a little nicer because you can see that it's fit in there. And you can use a pin or your seam ripper for this, but you're basically just gonna poke the holes through the paper. I'm just gonna mark so that I know the front from the back. And how I find the holes are, I feel for like a little raised bump and make sure it's all straight before you puncture. Little raised bump, it should be along the same line as your others. And then that's it. There we go. Sometimes it takes a little bit. I try and make it nice and big just so that it aligns nice. Same thing, use your sense of touch. Takes a little bit of patience, but in the long run, it'll end up helping us. And you can take like a little peek under your paper if you need to. See where everything's at. Just keep making sure that your cardboard edge is aligned with your paper. Okay, so I have the front template finished. can see all the holes are marked. Still fits nicely into that little folded pocket I made in the paper. And we're gonna set that aside. Make sure you don't lose this because it'll make sewing a little harder on you. And we're gonna do the same thing for the back. So you should have two templates that look like this, opposite of each other. What we're gonna do now is start the gluing process. So take some of your scrap cardboard from making your covers. I like to make these little square pieces, it's just easier. I'm gonna set it aside your fabric for a second. Flip over your piece of cardboard that's your cover back to this side that you want face down on your fabric. We're gonna coat it in glue. So I'm just gonna pour a little because you need a good amount. We probably won't use all of this because we're gonna spread it pretty thin, but we want it on every part of the cardboard cover. So use the scrap piece of cardboard you got to kind of smear it all over. I guess we did use it all. Looks like it was almost the perfect amount. Might need a tiny bit more. So take your fabric, align it as best as you can in the center. Looks good enough for me. Apply pressure. You're gonna flip it over. Start from the center out and just kind of use your hands to smooth out any wrinkles. There might be excess glue that comes through the fabric. That's okay. I make sure to really get the corners. Okay. So now we're gonna fold over these pieces and glue these down. I like to do a little trick in the corner where you fold the corner in and then both sides in, and it makes a really nice square edge to your book cover. So same thing, we're gonna take the glue. It's okay if you get glue that you can see, oops, on this part, because we're gonna end up covering it. Again, just smearing the glue so it coats the whole surface of where you're gonna stick your fabric. You don't need to coat the whole surface of this side, just where the fabric is gonna overlay. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna start with the corners. Fold the corner in like this. You can do that on all 4 of them to start. You're probably gonna get a little messy on this part, but having a little glue on your fingers kind of helps to smooth everything down so it wants to stick. So once you have your corners in place, then you can start to fold over your fabric. And you want to pull it as tightly as you can so that it makes a really nice crisp edge. And I'm pressing down and pulling in this direction to try and get as much stretch as I can. And I always go opposite sides first. That's just how I do it. You don't have to do it. I find that it helps the stretching process a little bit. Push, push, push. Same with this side. Pull it. And this side. So you should end up with something like this. So I'm gonna take some of that glue and just kind of go over the very edge of the fabric so that I know that it's really glued down. Like I said, this will be hidden. You'll only see the very edge of the fabric once we're finished. Okay, don't worry about any of the strings or anything right now. We'll let that dry a little bit before we poke any holes, just so our template doesn't stick to it. You can start working on the other side, meaning the other cover, while you let this one dry. So once your covers are dry, it's time to poke your holes. You're gonna use your template. I misplaced my seam ripper, so I'm gonna use a pin. I actually already poked the holes in this one, so that's why my template looks a little raggedy. But you just are gonna line it up like when you first made it, and gently stick your pin or seam ripper in. You'll be able to kind of feel the hole because the pin will go through easily. If this is too difficult for you, another option is taking like your phone flashlight and putting it behind the other side of the cover to see where the little holes are. You'll be able to see a little bit of light. If you have a bright light in your room or something, you can use that. And then you're just gonna recreate those holes before we finish the inside of the covers. So same thing on both the front and the back. Do this one with you. Make sure you have it on the right side. Almost poked it through on the wrong side. So once you've put the holes back into the covers, I want you to take whatever utensil you use to poke them and just kind of put it back in each one and move it around so that they get just a little bit bigger, a little easier to see. This is what you should have completed now, is both your covers and all of your signatures. And now we're ready to sew it together. I don't want you guys to worry about the insides of the covers right now, because what we're going to end up doing is gluing this last piece of paper down onto the inside of our covers as a way to help stick our book together after we bind it. Just adds a little bit more structural integrity. What I want you to do now is align all of your covers with your signatures where you've poked the holes, and get out a color of thread, a needle, your scissors, and that should be it. You can use whatever color thread you want. It's individual to you. And then we're gonna get started with binding the back cover.